Well Studio. We're pleased to welcome now, it's Lucien Smith. He's the former chairman of the Mississippi GOP. Lucien, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely, Gerard. Always good to be with you.
You bet. So we've had, I'm going to call it a legislative session with a lot of activity, but not a great deal of result. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think the tax cut, you were right. There's a lot that's talked about that I wish would have happened. School choice being the biggest example to me of an opportunity where we just missed we missed an opportunity. We whiffed on something that could have done a lot of good for a lot of children. I think if you had asked me 2 weeks ago whether we would eliminate the income tax in Mississippi, I probably would have said, no, we're not going to do it this year. We're going to get there eventually. But the sides were so far apart. And so I do think, I mean, this is a real historic accomplishment. And it's a testament to a lot of people who've been involved. The House obviously had been the early promoter of this going back to Philip Gunn when he was Speaker. But there's been a lot of tenacity on the House side. It would have been easy to take kind of a token win, drop back, get a little something incremental. But they made it clear they wanted full elimination of the income tax. And then I also think you got to give a lot of credit to Chairman Harkins in the Senate, who was able to get together. And I know we got this, there's a typographical issue, but Chairman Harkins put something together that delivered on the elimination of the income tax while having these triggers in place that should have kept from there being any risk of us cutting taxes so much we couldn't fund government services.
Right. So I was a bit amused by a couple of reports or notes of this historic event in our state, the elimination of the income tax. Sean Hannity, of course, very popular right-wing conservative opinion journalist on Fox News and has his own radio show. He actually tweeted Mississippi governor's Facebook, Mississippi governor excited to sign income tax bill that state Senate passed by mistake.
It's not quite accurate. I mean, I guess.
Oh boy,
I feel for the staff and lawyers who are involved with drafting it because, and I think it says a lot that the lieutenant governor and the chairman are not saying, well, the staff made an error.
Yeah,
but at the end
absolutely.
of the day. Because at the end of the day, the buck stops with them. But the truth of the matter is that's how this works. I mean, you've got a lawyer who says, we have drafted the legislation you told us to draft. This is what it does. And somebody made a mistake. And you've been involved. I mean, both of us have been involved in plenty of deals where you see paper coming across in email from 15 different people.
No doubt.
You ask 15 lawyers to draft you something, you're going to get 15 different versions of it. A lot of us have this habit that you send us something, we're going to make an edit because otherwise you might think that we're not providing value. And it seems to me, I mean, this is what always scares you anytime you've got complicated documents, that there's going to be a typo that's a substantive change.
Yeah.
But that it somehow gets missed.
Yeah.
And I feel for the folks who are involved because it's an error that can happen.
Well, I think I shared with you privately in text the other day, I made such a mistake in my business career. Very few of us that haven't, honestly.
Absolutely.
But when you're if you got any chance of succeeding in business or almost life in general, once you make a mistake, you take stock of it. You acknowledge it, you recognize it, you come up with a plan of action to prevent it from happening again, and you put those measures in place. We did that. This will likely result in the same. I think we probably will never see another situation where there's some sort of, and it's likely only to occur, if you think about it, Lucien, with a computational type bill.
That's right.
Where you've got this problem. I think in the future we probably won't see that. And I don't remember ever coming across this. If you think about the thousands of bills that have been drafted
I
in the
can't
state,
think of one like this.
Me either.
But you have, well, two things I'll say. I can imagine, the scenario, somebody sends the document across that says 0.85. Some other lawyer looks at it and says, well, it would be clearer if we said 85%.
Yeah.
And in the track changes, it looks like the period's been deleted, but it hadn't been deleted, and you didn't do a close enough read on the clean document to see that it was there. So, but this is the reason, and we've talked about this in a different context. This is the reason if we ever bring the referendum process back, why it has to be statutory. and it has to be something that the legislature can immediately change. Because I can remember, this has been a decade ago, we made some changes to criminal law to try to save some money in corrections, and created this small window of people who had done effectively a more serious crime, a less serious crime, but who were punished more than the people who'd committed a more serious crime. And it was a drafting error. It got fixed the next year. It wasn't intentional. A very small number of people may have been affected by it. But anytime you've got a multi-hundred-page law that's getting passed, there's a risk that there's a small error in it.
I think what's unique about this one, and your example, it certainly has merit, where that wasn't the intention. My guess is, though, both chambers agreed, that's not what we wanted. Right.
That's
in that
right.
case.
That's right. And here's the
the difference here is one chamber wants this, the other chamber doesn't.
Because there is a process. I was talking to somebody about this earlier, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will let us know. But there is a compilation committee that comes in afterwards that can say, oh, there was an error. So say you pass two different versions of changes to the same bill.
Yeah.
They can come in and reconcile it and say, well, the legislature intended to both make this amendment and this amendment.
Okay.
But you've got to have everybody say, oh, that was a Scrivener's error. And I'm reasonably confident the House is going to say, no, we meant 0.85%.
Exactly.
So I don't think that one's getting changed.
Well, it's headed to the governor, is what it looks like. To my knowledge, he has yet to sign it.
He hadn't signed it as of about 20 minutes ago when I checked.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm sure that's the case.
But like you said, he's made clear he's going to sign it.
So the another headline concerning this legislation came from the Mississippi Today, which I think it's fair to say opposes any form of tax reform that would reduce the income tax, or any taxes for that matter.
Certainly makes sense.
Maybe the sales tax on groceries. I think they might show some support on that. But their headline on this legislation from yesterday, how did the Mississippi Typo Tax Swap Act of 2025 happen? And they give kind of a sequence of events on how we went from point A to the final product there. I guess we can talk about that until the cows come home, as the saying goes, but it is what it is. I will say this. I know Chairman Harkins, as you do very well, he's not pointing fingers at anybody. You pointed that out. He takes full responsibility for this. Honestly, I don't think it's his exclusive culpability in this case, but nonetheless, as a good leader should, and being the chair of the Finance Committee, he's come forward. I mean, he's shared that with me. I don't think he's mad about me telling that on the air here, but he says, he told me, Lucien, and you can appreciate this, that it was hard to get what we got in the original Senate bill through the Senate, and he spent a lot of time whipping his conference and talking to some Democrats as well, who ultimately supported the bill because we had 4 Republicans that did not. Right. The original Senate bill I'm talking about. So by the narrowest of margins, with a 3/5 vote requirement to pass revenue legislation, he got it done, and then all of a sudden, post that, we find this drafting error. If we run into a situation down the road, which has always been the contention of Speaker of the House Jason White, Chairman Trey Lamar, where, it doesn't appear that revenues are going to be sufficient to meet reasonable spending requirements, the legislature will have to step in and act.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and these triggers don't go into effect until fiscal year 2031.
That's right.
So,
but they're not triggers.
They're not triggers.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of time if the economy is not growing at a rate where it would be safe to make this large of cuts, and I think it will. I think I appreciate the optimism. But if we look up, we've got 6 years effectively to say, guys, we got to come back and do this in a different way.
And we have to be clear. Economic growth, and you've heard Chairman Lamar and the Speaker refer to that, and I'm with them many times, that they believe this would be stimulative to economic growth, and we've experienced significant economic growth. We've seen our revenues increase commensurately over the last few years, which is all good news for the state of Mississippi. But in terms of generating tax revenue when you're eliminating or even reducing the income tax, you're now relying on sales tax.
Right.
So that economic growth has to translate into me and you and the rest of the Mississippi population spending more money.
That's a very good point.
To generate sales tax. It can't just be, hey, we just landed a new AWS project. That's fantastic. But unless that translates into more sales taxes, that's not really covering the loss of the income tax.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point.
We got Lucien Smith in the Element Wealth studio. We'll continue this discussion. We'll touch on some federal politics as well while Lucien's in the Element Wealth studio. Stay with us. So we're visiting with Lucien Smith, former GOP chairman in Mississippi. The tax bill, so as it stands right now, you said you looked at it about 20 minutes ago. It doesn't appear that, does appear that it's headed to the governor for signature. That's going to happen, but it doesn't appear that he's signed it.
He hadn't signed it yet. It's due from the governor, I believe, on the 31st.
Right.
So I think a week from yesterday, a week from yesterday.
Okay.
And my guess is there will be some sort of big public bill signing.
And I suspect that's why there's a bit of delay. I don't think there's any question he's going to sign it. He's made this a priority.
Right. Well,
for quite some time.
There's always a pretty robust, I was, as you know, Governor Bryant's chief of staff. There's a pretty robust bill review process in that office, even for legislation you're supporting.
Okay.
So you end up having a substantive policy staffer reads it. A couple of lawyers probably read it. Policy director, chief of staff generally go through every bill that goes to the governor just to make sure you don't find out later that somebody stuck on page 100 something you've got a major problem
crazy.
with. Now, on a bill like this, my guess is they all have read it over and over and over again, but still, I imagine it'll take a little bit to go through that process.
And, I honestly would think the governor would want to have some sort of big ceremonious production on this because this has been his highest priority since he's been running for governor. I mean, it was in his prior term, not just this term.
And it's a good opportunity to let him address directly in a public forum this sort of the sky is falling stuff we're hearing because of the typo. Because we're going to keep hearing how without these triggers, we're going to turn into Kansas. We're going to end up, we'll no longer have a highway patrol. We're going to get rid of education in the state.
That's crazy.
And that's obviously not the case. And I think he can do a good job of getting there and answering those questions and explaining to people we're fine. We got a long time to figure this out.
If something should happen 4 or 5 years down the road, then I agree with you. I think that the legislature will be prudent.
Right.
And they'll act responsibly and they'll address it. Honestly, whatever actions they take might not be popular, but they might be necessary.
That's right.
And I think that's the way you have to look at it. But that was a major deal. School choice. I want to visit with you on that a little bit. You and I both are proponents of that and have been for quite some time. We've seen the neighboring states all enact very robust school choice programs. Other states are also looking at, I think Wyoming, the latest state to enact a full universal school choice. I read the other day, Lucien, even New Hampshire, which is kind of a purple state.
Right.
Usually they'll have, or not usually, but often you'll see their statewide leaders be Republican, their congressional delegations typically Democrat. So they're kind of a quintessential purple state, if you will. But it looks like they've got a program that's probably going to be enacted. Governor Abbott in Texas, he's been fighting extremely hard to get something done in Texas. The powers that oppose it are quite strong in Texas, and they are really pulling out all the stops. I'm just going to make a statement, and I'll let you comment on it. Mississippi's a hard place to get this done, and I think it has to do with the fact that the racial composition of our population is so close. I still feel like there's a race element to this, and I'm not calling Mississippians racist. That's not my point here. I just feel like there's a race element to this.
I think that's right. I worked for Governor Bryant when we pushed the 2013 school reform, Education Reform Act.
Yeah.
That has been part of what's caused, or the main driver of this Mississippi miracle we've experienced was that third grade gate and some other pieces of that legislation. And early on, there were choice components in there. And we expanded charter schools a little bit in 2013, but there was district-to-district transfer was one of the things we proposed. And there was a coalition of that you didn't often see in the legislature that opposed it. And it was principally black members of the legislature who were concerned we were doing something to resegregate schools, and suburban white members who never said it, but seemed to be concerned about people crossing state lines.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
And I think that's undeniable. And that's the thing that's crazy about it is the principal beneficiary, at least what is crazy about the hesitation that black members of the legislature had and have to this sort of choice is the principal beneficiaries of this are going to be minority students.
No doubt about it.
Not to say that it be exclusively
the charter schools.
Same deal. Same deal. I mean, it was the charter school changes that have been passed were principally the yes votes tended to be people whose districts wouldn't benefit because of the limitations that were put in there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I just think, and again, I'm not trying to characterize anybody in Mississippi as racist, because I think, man, have we ever made some serious progress along those fronts.
No doubt about it.
I'm old enough to remember incidents that are embarrassing, honestly, that you just don't see anything remotely close to that today.
Right.
And in my business career, just never saw it. However, I do think this is something where people tend to want to live around people, go to school with people, you know what I'm saying, sort of congregate with people when they have a choice in the matter that are more closely aligned to them demographically. Now, I live in an upscale neighborhood. I've shared that on the program before, and there are great black families all around me, and I don't think anything of it.
Right.
I mean, it's no big deal. Who send their kids to the most expensive private school in the state.
Right.
More power to them. That's fantastic. I think that in itself illustrates how far we've come in Mississippi.
Absolutely.
But it feels like there's an element of this when it comes to schools.
I think there certainly is when you talk about the interdistrict transfer piece of it.
Yes.
You know, I think I think the bulk of what kills school choice is that education establishment that is focused on preserving the status quo, the sort of parents campaign, you know, let's protect administrators group that's out there. And it's just terribly disappointing. And it is, you know, I mean, in my mind, it borders on or is a civil rights issue. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I've got school choice because I've been fortunate enough that I can move to a school district that has great public schools. I'm fortunate that I can stroke a check and send my kids to a private school if I want to. But that's a fairly small segment of Mississippi's population. And so, you know, moving towards true universal school choice benefits a lot of people who aren't fortunate enough to be able to do that.
I truly believe that the biggest benefit of enacting school choice, robust school choice programs, be it public to public, public to private, and then all the way up to universal, but just stop at the public to private, is not so much that you'd have lots of students transferring. I actually don't think that would happen.
I think you're right.
But what I do think would happen is that the threat of that would cause those schools to kick into gear, just like it does in business.
Everywhere else. I mean, you imagine what your grocery store would look like if you had to go to the grocery store you were assigned to because it happened to be in your neighborhood, and they knew you couldn't go to any other grocery store. Now, that's not to say there aren't phenomenal public school teachers and administrators in the state.
Absolutely.
My mother was a public school teacher. My grandmother was a public school teacher. My grandfather was a public school administrator who went on to be dean of education at Mississippi State. I mean, we are public school believers, but the question is, are we building the systems that are best for the outcomes that children are going to receive in Mississippi? And I understand the hesitation about choice if you go back 30 years where this was something that was sort of a Republican idea that hadn't been implemented in many states. But they're doing it in Louisiana. They're doing it in Tennessee. They're doing it in Arkansas. They're doing it in Alabama.
Florida, Arizona.
We're surrounded by people who've done it. We've got loads and loads, I mean, literally decades of data on what it has done, and what it does is improve student outcomes.
No doubt.
The question is, do you think that the goal of the education system is to best prepare the students that you've got to enter and be productive members of the workforce, or do you think the function of the education system is to pay administrators and pay capital expenses for school districts? And I think the conservative viewpoint, the only conservative viewpoint, is that the purpose of the education system is to educate children. And what we need to be focused on is figuring out the best way to educate children in our state.
Man, you saw that front and center during COVID, how it became so painfully obvious that the education establishment, which is extremely powerful and engages in protectionism, perhaps like no other group in our country, seem to be more focused on their personal benefit,
right,
and that of the establishment that runs education than the kids themselves.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
I mean, especially these powerful unions that have seemed to have been gaining power through the decades, virtually all of which are aligned with Democrats.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, and the parents' campaign's it's not a union, and it's not technically a political group, but from my view, it is essentially a Democratic political action.
There's no doubt about it.
That's their function, is to talk about how the mean old Republicans don't want to educate children. Well, that's hooey, and we got at least 15 years of proof that that's inaccurate.
Absolutely true. Hang around, we'll keep talking. We got Lucien Smith in the Element Wealth studio. You know, I remain concerned, Lucien, that our state, which holds itself up to be one that adheres to conservative principles, you look at things like school choice, at certificate of need laws, vehicles that you and I went round and round on a couple of years ago, the bill that passed. It feels like alcohol. Protectionism is alive and well in our state, and that is counter to the ideals and the values of conservatism. We got some work to do there, it feels like.
I agree. I agree with you there. I mean, it is easy, and you see this at all levels of government, it is easy to be ideologically pure when you're not in control. When you then have to actually implement some of these things, it gets a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
And I do think, and that I think is the primary driver on the education side, is the education establishment in Mississippi continues to be very powerful, very well funded, often have a lot of political stroke, and they're not interested in competition.
I think that's right. And we don't have congruence among the three principal lawmakers in the state. We've got a Speaker of the House, a Lieutenant Governor that are at odds with the Speaker of the House and the Governor are aligned. And it's no secret the Lieutenant Governor has been an opponent of more robust school choice, although he did right here on this program say he was prepared to support portability if it allowed a student that attends what he termed was a failing school to transfer. But they couldn't even get that out of the Senate.
Yeah. I mean, I think Mississippi needs to go towards universal school choice. I mean, this is we're not the first people doing this. We're surrounded by states that are doing it. You can look at multiple places. Florida's probably the best example, that have been doing various versions of school choice for decades, and it improves student outcomes.
Yeah.
And it requires, it's no different from your health or finances, how you run a business. If you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. If you get to the end of every month and you go, I can't figure out why I don't have any money in the bank, well, it's either because you don't make enough or you spend too much. And you got to fix one of those if you want to start saving. Same thing's true of education. If you are happy with the educational outcomes in Mississippi, and I think there's a lot to be proud of. We've made some real strides.
No doubt.
But if you think where we are now is where we ought to be forever, then we should keep doing what we're doing, and we'll keep getting these outcomes.
Yeah, totally
agree. If we want to see changes, we're going to have to change. We're going to have to change some of the things that we do, and education choice is one of the things that we absolutely ought to be considering. And we're going to fall behind the progress that is being made in our surrounding states because we haven't done it.
Yeah. Turn our attention to federal matters, and I'll make one comment about that's related to school choice, which is Mississippi, of course, which overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump in the election, is not aligned with the president in his views on education choice.
He's been very clear. He's been very clear on it. I mean, I would love to see, I don't know that this will happen, but I would love to see federal education funding somehow tied to choice mandates, which would require an act of Congress. I don't think the president could do that alone, but certainly something I'd be happy to see happen because it might force some hands here.
Totally agree. So have you ever seen as much activity and just accomplishment and just action coming out of a brand new administration the way you have in the last 60 days with this president?
It's incredible. And he is, people are not used to, I saw somebody on Facebook who said, this is not normal. And they were obviously meaning as a criticism, but it's not normal, but in a lot of ways it's not normal in a good way, because what tends to happen is Republican presidents campaign a certain way, and then they get constrained by the nature of Washington and are told things are impossible and we can't possibly do it. And maybe sometimes, like politicians sometimes do, they made some promises that they never intended to follow through on.
Sure.
Trump, by contrast, seems to be doing the things that he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't always feel like there's a carefully planned out playbook for everything,
right.
but it does feel like there's a carefully planned out strategy for the individual things that he is doing, and he's following through on things.
Totally agree, and he's surrounded himself with cabinet members and high-ranking officials that are fully aligned with his agenda.
That's right.
And at this point, that seems to be it appears that that's going to continue. I'm concerned about the Congress. I don't think the Democrats can block the Trump agenda, but I think the Republicans can block the Trump agenda.
Absolutely. And you saw a lot of that in the first term. I think they're going to be better this time than they were 8 years ago, because he is first of all, I think people know he's serious. People have also seen the sustained popularity that he's got, and I think that'll motivate a lot of Republicans. At the same time, the way Congress works, as you know, you have to have Democratic votes to get anything done in the Senate.
In the Senate.
And the House majority right now is so thin that you don't have to have Democratic votes necessarily, but you can't lose much in the way of Republican votes. So we're not going to get as much out of Congress as I would like to see us do. But I do think the president is aware, and I've seen some of his surrogates say this, if history is any indication, the Democrats will take the House back in a year and a half. I hope that's not the case, but that's what history suggests. So I think Trump and the people around him know if he is going to get his agenda passed, it's got to happen in this Congress.
Yeah.
You can't expect to do it 2 years from now.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. So we've got Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. They're trying to come up with some sort of breakthrough on what appears to be right now. This is being reported today from all the outlets that cover national matters in Washington, that the agenda is somewhat stalled. And, of course, what we're mainly talking about is a budget reconciliation bill that could pass with a simple majority in the Senate. And there are just some differences on what that bill should look like in terms of tax cuts and spending, for example, on defense, and more spending on security measures for the border. I don't know if they're going to work this out in time. And something else we got to talk about again is the old debt ceiling. Now the CBO has advised the Congress we're running out of money in July again. It just feels like that we're going to kick that can down the road one more time with respect. And of course, we're not remotely close to a point where we don't have to borrow money to make the government function. But might we get a deal between the House and the Senate? Is that in the offing here? They extended, with the continuing resolution, extended us out through September.
I hope that we will, because this governance by crisis, which is essentially what Congress has done on the fiscal side, I can't tell you when it began, but it's been long enough ago that I couldn't tell you, is not good. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the markets. It's not good for the republic. We ought to have regular order in how this stuff gets done. We don't need to be waiting to the last second. There ought to be 12 appropriation bills, and so I certainly hope that they do. But unfortunately, with the numbers where they are, it's difficult. As we discussed, it's very difficult to get an agreement that can pass both chambers. So I hope we do. Well,
the narrow margin in the House now, I believe that's also being reported as one of the reasons that Representative Elise Stefanik from New York has not been confirmed, because we lose her vote.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, she's still hanging out there, yet to be confirmed, because we'd vacate another seat.
And in a competitive district. I mean, it's a Republican-leaning district, but it's not a slam dunk. It's not Mississippi's third congressional district.
Or you could get a squishy Republican.
Right.
So, and she's also been one who has insisted that we've got to increase the state and local tax deduction cap for any bill that would get her support. And that just compounds the problem as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's principally a northern problem, and my guess is she represents, or northern and western problem. My guess is she represents a bunch of people,
no doubt,
significantly affected by it.
Yeah, where the $10K deduction is peanuts compared to what they actually pay in terms of state and local taxes. Well, hopefully we'll get something done. The president has indicated he still wants the one big beautiful bill. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson says that Memorial Day is his goal to produce that bill and get it to the president's desk. But right now, as you know, his committees are behind closed doors using the framework they passed a few weeks ago to draft the details of the legislation. That could also affect the state of Mississippi if they're talking seriously about cutting Medicaid, which I believe they are. That could have an effect on our budget as well.
No doubt about it. I mean, the Medicaid being the best example. I mean, there could be major changes there that force an overhaul of the program, and it's very much a wait and see on seeing what they end up doing.
I welcome it, to be honest with you. I think it needs a complete overhaul and a revamping and get back to something that makes sense. But it could affect us financially here in the state of Mississippi. We just have to respond.
No doubt about that at all. Yeah, it's going to be a big change.
Lucien Smith has been our guest. Thanks for coming in, Lucien.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
Gerard, great to see you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We're coming right back with the final segment of Middays. Stay with us.